In today's session of compliance training, we're going to be discussing HIPAA. HIPAA is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. We're going to spend some time talking about how it applies to our organization and the safeguards we have in place to make sure we comply with it. There are three types of covered entities that must comply with HIPAA. We fall into the category of healthcare providers. Business associates are anyone that does contracted services for us, but to be able to do that, they must see patient records. An example is transcription. They have to sign a business associate agreement and follow all HIPAA rules. You are not responsible for knowing who needs to sign a business associate agreement. Our compliance team will help with that. HIPAA has two sets of rules. Both deal with PHI, Protected Health Information. Let's talk about what PHI is. It is any information that would identify a patient. PHI can be electronic, written, or verbal. Even if you make a note on a Post-it note about a patient, that has become a piece of PHI. Once you're finished with that paper, it must be shredded instead of put in a garbage can because it's PHI. You can see other information showing on the screen that makes up PHI. Let's start with talking about the privacy rule. The privacy rule has three basic principles. We must have policies and procedures in place to protect PHI. We do, and you can find them on the shared drive. How we use and share PHI without the patient signing an authorization. And then the third piece is the 6 basic rights of the patient when it comes to their PHI. The intention of the privacy rule centers around what is called minimum necessary concept. Basically, what it means is if you don't have a reason to be viewing PHI, stay out of the patient's record. Only share what is requested, nothing extra. Our medical records group conducts audits to make sure that we are all following this rule. Another point to mention is that it's never okay to look in a chart for curiosity's sake. Whether the patient has celebrity status or is the neighbor next door, you should only be looking in their file if you are part of the team caring for that patient. We have a process in place to make sure that this does not happen. Regardless of who the patient is, they deserve the same privacy as anyone else. So if you don't have a reason to look at the information, don't. If we discover that you did during one of our chart audits, you will be immediately terminated. We have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to respecting and protecting our patients' privacy. The same goes for your family, friends, coworkers, and even your own records. It's convenient if you get hurt and need an orthopedic doctor and you work for us. But at that point, you turn from an employee to a patient. You can't go into the system and make your own appointment. You can't read your own MRI results. Because you are now a patient, you should receive the same access to information as any other patient. Remember, a normal patient can't go into the system and look up their information, and neither can you. You must also be careful about what you talk about and to whom you speak with. If you see your husband's golfing buddy in the lobby, speak to them like you would as their friend. But don't go home at night and mention you saw him to your husband. Your husband doesn't have any reason to know what you learned while working. He is not caring for his buddy medically, so he doesn't need to know about it. You must protect the friend's privacy as they are our patient. Now, we all know that you can't decide what you will hear or conversations that you will overhear. Situations come up when the unintentional happens. The government understands those types of situations happen, and they call them incidental disclosures. Our job is to make sure that we minimize the chances of incidentally disclosing information and have practices in place to prevent it when possible. So let's talk about some things we can do to help minimize the chance of an incidental disclosure. When you're in a clinic with a patient, make sure you shut the door. This will keep people from overhearing your conversation. If you're working at the front desk, call the patient up to the desk if you have a question. If a patient approaches you, shield the screen or chart you are looking at to make sure they can't see anything. As holders of all of this information, we need to know with whom and how to share the information. Patients can request to have their information shared. All requests for medical records, which is different than the HIPAA notice, are handled by a third-party vendor. Anytime a patient wants their medical records released, they must complete an authorization form. Patients are often under the impression that they have authorized this when they signed the HIPAA agreement, but that is not the case. Individuals that are listed on the HIPAA form are only authorized for us to speak to or who can pick up prescriptions. We are also permitted to release records for what we call TPO, treatment, payment, and healthcare operations. Treatment is for continuity of care. We get multiple requests from other physicians daily. Since those are coming from another medical facility, we are able to release those records without any issue. Payment is just what it sounds like. Whether we're billing or getting a pre-certification, we do not have to have the patient's authorization to do that. Operations is the basic day-to-day activities. If we are using information for auditing charts, creating training, or doing a quality review and the likes, we do not have to have authorization for any of those purposes. What is required by the government is that we verify who is requesting the records. We'll often get calls from other doctors' offices to request information, but because we can't identify them, we must ask them to fax a request on their letterhead or a fax cover sheet. They can handwrite the patient's name, date of birth, and information they need. That way we have been able to verify the identity of the person making the request. That's assuming we can read their handwriting. We do need to make sure we are doing what is right by our patients. Doing this ensures we are protected and we know every place we sent our patients' information to. On the screen, you can see the 6 patient rights that I mentioned earlier. Our patients are able to receive their records free of charge. Any requests that fall under the rights 2 through 5 need to be sent to your privacy officer to fulfill. They will verify the validity of the request before proceeding. An example is a patient asked for her record to be changed because it stated her sister had thyroid disease, but she didn't have a sister. We were easily able to make the determination that the record should be updated. We will only amend records when they are true and valid. If it's questionable, we will talk to the medical staff and let them determine if a record can be amended. An example of restrictions is if you are paying for your service 100% out of pocket and don't want your information shared with the insurance company. We can do that. An accounting is a tracker of where all patients' information was shared. Confidential communications is if the patient has only one phone number or address they want information sent to. We can accommodate that too. And then finally, all patients will receive a paper copy of our privacy notice. Privacy acknowledgement forms are signed by patients during the registration and check-in process. It explains how we will manage their PHI and their rights. If you run out of privacy notices at the front desk, contact your privacy officer to get additional copies. If you work at the front desk and have a patient challenge you about signing it, simply mark the form patient refused to sign and move on. Remember that Post-it note I mentioned earlier that you wrote patient information on? When you're ready to dispose of it, you must shred it. You cannot rip it into little pieces. Any paper with PHI must be shredded. We have shred bins located at all our locations for you to put PHI. It needs to be shredded properly so there's no chance of a nefarious character piecing the information back together. There are even procedures about how the shred company must shred the paper. At no point are you allowed to forward work emails to your private email account. Information sent to your work email is for work purposes only and many times contains patient information. It's become common for people to use the camera on their phone to take a picture of something they want to remember. Please do not do this. You're creating a risk for PHI, and you should not have PHI on your personal cell phone. Okay, so social media. I know this seems like common sense, but this slide is on here for a reason. When it comes to social media, patients do not exist to us. Please don't comment on a patient's post. When patients are here, do not take pictures of them or with them unless it's part of a marketing campaign and has been approved by our marketing team. Now we're going to talk about some of the security standards and how we protect our electronic information. When you log into your computer, there's a paragraph that everyone skips through reading, but still goes ahead and presses OK. Here's what that paragraph says. The computer is property of Ortho Alliance and is for work purposes only. It also tells you that you have zero privacy on the computer. At this time, we aren't actively monitoring your computer, tracking where you're searching, or sending warnings. Only when there's an explicit reason will we investigate your computer usage. For instance, if you're struggling to get your work done in the allotted time, then we might see what systems you're using, where you're searching, and stuff like that. That will come at the request of a manager. There are 4 key concepts to security standards. Keeping everything confidential so it can't be tampered with and is available if you need it. On the flip side, we have to make sure that people that shouldn't be accessing the system can't get there. And then how we protect it, whether it's floods, hurricanes, or hackers, how we protect our system and keep our information backed up. And then finally, ensuring workplace compliance. That's why you get to spend this time learning about security. The standards are divided into 3 categories: administrative, physical, and technical. Let's break them down and how you will use them. Starting with administrative, there are 9 standards, but only 4 that you will use day to day. So let's talk about those. The first is having a sanctioned policy, which has been outlined in your employee manual. Your privacy officer will investigate any potential issues first. They will do all they can to fix the problem. They will engage your manager to handle anything further. The outcome will vary depending on the severity of the issue and if you've already had disciplinary action in place. If you faxed information to an auto dealer in Canada instead of to an insurance company because the number is 888 instead of 800, it's a simple mistake. If you're a strong employee with no history of issues, we'll sit down and have a conversation. We'll talk about attention to detail, double checking fax numbers, and then we'll move along with our day. But if you're on a final written warning and it states that another breach of policy will result in termination, then you will be terminated for a simple clerical error. If your action is severe enough, for instance, you're selling identities, then you will probably be asked not to return to work. The second item is that you have to assign responsibility. If you have an auditor ask you who your HIPAA coordinator is, you need to know that it's your privacy officer. Answer the auditor and then remove yourself from the conversation. Send your designee an email with a heads up and then continue on with your job for the day. Another safeguard is security awareness training. Obviously, we do training like we're doing right now. Occasionally, you will receive reminders when we see that mistakes have been made. For instance, we notice that the same credit card has been put on a couple of patients for payment. An email only to the groups that need the reminders will be sent. It'll include suggestions of how to avoid those types of mistakes. Another type of training is on how we protect our systems. You can never download software onto your computer. Computer viruses can attach themselves and then invade our entire network. If there is a software program that you need, let your manager know, and they can work on getting it approved and loaded by IT. If you suspect that there is a virus on your computer, it keeps locking up or is moving so slow it feels like you're swimming through mashed potatoes, call IT immediately. They will remote in to find out what's going on. The phone number for the help desk is located in the upper right-hand corner of your computer screen. There is protection software loaded onto your computer by IT. Please don't ever disable it. Another safeguard is not clicking on links or attachments in emails. We'll talk about phishing in more depth in just a few slides. Let's talk about passwords. A recent security test discovered that criminals can hack into a 12-digit password in about an hour's time. So our passwords require 15 digits. You must have a capital letter, a lowercase letter, a symbol, and a number in your password. There are lots of helpful tricks to helping you determine your password, using a phrase, replacing letters with special characters. Find what works for you, but never share or post your passwords. Another reason we have unique IDs is so we can track the systems and files that you log into. We do this because we have to conduct chart audits every month. Remember that minimum necessary rule? Chart audits are how we prove we are complying with it. So if we can't make sense of why you were in a chart, we'll take a screenshot and send you an email stating that a chart you were in was chosen for an HIPAA audit. And then we'll ask you why you were in there. As an example, we had a front desk person see a doctor. Someone from another doctor's staff was in her chart. It turns out the front desk person knew she couldn't make her own appointment, so she asked the person to do it. Completely legitimate situation, so we documented the reason in her audit log and we moved on. It's also really handy if you have a patient returning a call and you need to find out who called him last. You can look in the chart history and see who that person was. The fourth safeguard for us to talk about is if there's a security incident or you believe there was one. If a patient gets records they're not supposed to, or a bill that isn't theirs, if you suspect a HIPAA breach, get your manager right away. They will contact your privacy officer. Do anything you can to gently remove any documentation that was handed to a patient or mailed to a patient when it didn't belong to them. When a mistake is made, do all that you can to not make the situation worse. For instance, if there was a billing error and a patient receives a bill for PT, but they've never had PT. Again, try to gently remove the documentation that was given to the patient when it didn't belong to them. Make sure that you talk to your manager and apologize to the patient for a clerical error. You can simply apologize without explaining the why behind the error. Make sure that you assure the patient that we will fix our mistake, and please don't make the situation worse by trying to over-explain to the patient. Just rely on apologizing for a clerical error. There are 4 standards for physical safeguards. You will only use 2 on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about workstation security. You'll need to make sure you lock your computer whenever you walk away from it. Do not leave your computer unlocked, as that will risk patient information being seen by someone that shouldn't. The quickest way to lock your screen is by pressing the Windows key followed by L. That will lock your system. Anytime you walk away from your computer, you must lock your screen. If you go to the restroom, step out of an exam room, whatever, always lock your screen. At the bottom, you see a note about being responsible for anything and everything that happens under your login. If you have a shared computer with other employees, it's your responsibility to log in and out. Do not complete work under another employee's login. Remember, you are responsible for whatever happens while you are logged in. So if someone else gets into a chart that they shouldn't, the responsibility falls on you. We're going to talk about safeguards you must have in place to be sure we meet the requirements of our cyber liability insurance. If you are going to be accessing work information on your cell phone, then your cell phone must have password protection and the longest password that the cell phone allows. The longer the password, the more secure it is. Also, please set your timeout feature to the shortest time as possible. All computer hardware, including USB or thumb drives, must be provided by IT. They have genius ways of encrypting the device to make sure the information is secured. It adds a second set of security beyond your password, so if you lose a device, we are adding an extra layer of security to protect our patients. Anytime that you take anything with patient information off the property, it must stay with you at all times. If you're carrying files from one location to another, the files go everywhere you go. If you take a laptop home with you, the laptop goes wherever you go. If you're transporting an ultrasound machine, it goes wherever you go. Patient information cannot be locked and left in a trunk. So even if you're going home, take the laptop inside your home with you. We have a special kind of insurance policy that I mentioned just briefly to help protect us in the case of any kind of HIPAA issues. But they can only give us 24 hours to notify them if a device is lost. Notification after that will cause us to lose our coverage. This is even true on the weekends. If you lose a device that has PHI information on it, we must know it immediately. Here are some steps you must take if you happen to lose a device that has or can access patient information. First, you must let IT know right away. Their phone is answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. They will take steps to remotely wipe your device and put everything back to factory settings. So be sure you back up your phone regularly if you use it for work purposes. You will also need to call your privacy officer, as they will get in contact with the insurance company. IT can help you get in contact with them if you don't have their number handy. Another physical piece that could have PHI is a CD with patient's imaging burned on it. If that CD needs to be destroyed, know if you can put them in your thread bin or not. If not, then you need to give them to medical records and have them destroy the CD. Now let's talk about two technical safeguards you will be using regularly. Access control. This is why we have password security, why computers will automatically lock due to inactivity, and why we do chart audits. The second safeguard is encryption, which is something you will do anytime you're sending an email with PHI outside of our organization. To encrypt an email, you only have to type the word secure in the subject line of the email. Magic will happen behind the scenes to protect the email for us. Remember, it's when you're sending an email with PHI and the recipient is outside of our organization that you must encrypt the email. If you have access to patient information on your phone and you need to text it, maybe a doctor needs a report or an image sent, you'll need to be sure you have Halo installed on your phone. This is how we can securely send text messages. If you do not have Halo, your manager will need to request it for you from IT. Once your account has been established, you will get an email from Halo to set up your account. So phishing is a hot topic right now. All it takes is one wrong click for hackers to gain access to our system. It could be months before we knew that a virus was loaded or that a hacker was able to access our patient information. They could even hold our system hostage. Whether we're a company of 10 or a company of 10,000, all it takes is for one person to fall victim to a phishing email. Recent reports are stating that attempted phishing attacks on medical institutions is up over 80% in recent months. So the next few slides are going to talk about how to detect a phishing scam and the steps for you to take. Some things to watch out for that can help you determine if an email is phishing. External emails. Our system makes this easy for us by having a pale yellow banner warning us that the email is coming from an external source. Look at the from line. Make sure the email address it's coming from is spelled correctly. It's an easy thing to do to switch the O and the R in ortho. Be sure you recognize the person the email is coming from. Phishers are smart. They will go out to our website and see the names of our senior leaders, and they'll pick up how our email addresses are formatted. They'll imitate that in the from line with a fake email. When it comes to language, a lot of phishing emails are vague. They'll refer to customers or employees. Customer should be a dead giveaway, as we typically say patient, not customer. Also, there is normally a grammatical error, a word misspelled, or the wrong words used. Using language that requires immediate or urgent action is another red flag. They're hoping to make you nervous and get you to click on their link without thinking. Just remember that whether it's here or in your personal life, no legitimate company is going to ask you for your password or answers to your security questions through email. A couple more red flags are attachments and links. Keep on alert when reading an email with an attachment or a link to click on, especially if it's not something you're expecting to receive. Just don't click on it. Always investigate before clicking. One way is to hover over the link. A bubble will pop up showing you the address the link will take you to. Recent trends have been for phishers to use very short addresses or one that doesn't end with .com or .org. Read the address and make sure it looks legitimate. Some known websites that are often imitated are Amazon, UPS, FedEx, and Capital One. So what should you do if something seems fishy? Do not respond to the email. Never give out personal information or system information or login information. Don't open attachments or click on links. Investigate them first. Hover over them. Verify the link by doing a Google search on the company and compare it. You can send a separate email to the person and ask if the email is legitimate. You've always got the IT help desk that you can call for assistance. If you receive an email that you're uncertain is phishing attempt, or even if you're certain that it's a phishing attempt, call and alert them. They will have you forward the email for further investigation. Now that we've talked about all we do to prevent HIPAA breaches, it's time to talk about what can happen if we have a HIPAA breach. An easy way for the government to make money is through HIPAA violations. The majority of fines levied are in the 5, 6, or 7-digit dollar amounts. There was a man who had his laptop stolen from the trunk of his car. Turns out the laptop didn't have encryption, and the fine was $750,000. The fines are big, and the government is serious about it. A CVS was fined $2.4 million because their local I team reported that they were just throwing information away in a dumpster without shredding it first. They also get to pay additional money for the 20 years after the breach for an independent auditor to come in and verify they are doing everything right. Jail time is rare, but it can and it has happened. Keep in mind that the affected patient can hold you personally liable. If the company can prove that you have been trained and were told what not to do, but you do it anyway, then you put yourself at risk. While our first concern is always protecting our patients and their privacy, we also must keep in mind the financial and reputational impact that our great company could suffer from a breach. Please make every effort to comply with the privacy and security rules and the practices we have in place to comply with HIPAA. A super exciting thing for you to read is our policy manual. We must have one to be compliant with privacy and security rules. So where do you find ours? Since employees have access to the shared drive, that's where we keep the policy. The manual and all other documents that we want everyone to be able to get to are located there. There is a HIPAA folder, one for compliance, one for OSHA, and a host of other documents that are stored there. Again, you can find the policy manual on the shared drive under the HIPAA folder. This concludes our compliance training on HIPAA. I thank you for your attention today. Please remember, if you have any questions on HIPAA, our practices, or our policies, you can review the policy manual on the shared drive, and you can always reach out to your compliance and privacy officer for assistance as well. Have a wonderful day.